Welcome to the Group Dentistry Now show, the voice of the DSO industry. Join us as we talk with industry leaders about their challenges, successes, and the future of group dentistry. With over 200 episodes and listeners in over 100 countries, we're proud to be ranked the #1 DSO podcast. For the latest DSO news, analysis, and events, and to subscribe to our DSO weekly e-newsletter, visit groupdentistrynow.com. We hope you enjoyed today's show.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Group Dentistry Now show. I am Bill Newman, and as always, we appreciate you tuning in. We actually have some really interesting results from a consumer financing survey that Alphaeon Patient Financing has put together, and really excited to share those. We're really going to base the whole conversation on this podcast from these results, and I think it's going to give the audience some really interesting insights. Now, you can leverage patient financing, what patients are feeling right now, and just how I think you can better address what's going on in 2026 in the dental industry and with your patients. So looking forward to this. Without further ado, I'm going to make introductions here, and then we're going to get into some of the results from this survey, which you'll be able to have access to at the end of this podcast. We'll make sure that we get you over to a link so you can check out everything that we may not be able to cover in this podcast here. So we have with us Tony Seymour, who is the president of Alphaeon Patient Financing, Tate Roark, he is the VP of Dental Enterprise, and Amy Mendoza, who is the Chief Marketing Officer. It's great. Thanks, all of you, for being on today.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thank you.
Tony, why don't we kick things off with you, a little bit about your background, and can you talk a little bit about what Alphaeon does?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. My background is I graduated from business school, and I went into sales, and I wanted to get into medical device sales. So for the last 39 years, for the first 12 years or so, I was ophthalmic medical device sales. And then in 1999, I went to a small privately held company called Care Credit. And I was at Care Credit in through 2013. I left as a senior leader, executive vice president with them, and was able to found Alphaeon Patient Financing in 2013. And, the opportunity at Alphaeon was we wanted to give an alternative. Patient financing was in its infancy stage when I started with Care Credit, and it had developed, quite a bit over the 13 years I was there. And an opportunity presented itself to go with a startup. And that was a long time ago, but, we founded the company, and even before we had a bank, the really important thing for me is I really wanted to have, financial institutes, and it doesn't matter whether it's your bank or anything, the customer service was lacking. And that was one of the stakes that I put in the ground, that Alphaeon Patient Financing, I couldn't say anything at the time about approval rates or credit lines, but we were going to be the leader in healthcare financing and customer service.
Excellent. Thank you, Tony. Amy, you're up next, Chief Marketing Officer. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Thanks so much for having us, Bill. I have spent more than 2 decades in the healthcare space and supporting marketing. I actually started off in ad agency work. Wasn't gifted to be an artist, but loved business, and I thought marketing was the best blend of that. Early on in my career, I was invited to work with independent practices, and I ran a dental marketing agency. We supported about 400 practices across the country. So I was very familiar with helping dentists grow their practice, drive new patient numbers. And then I moved into the DSO space, helping practice groups do the same thing. And then I was able to transition into the world of technology and platforms and solutions on the RCM side. Very excited to partner with Alphaeon Patient Financing. They're right in lines of what I like to be able to do, which is get the message out and increase access. That's a cornerstone of where Alphaeon sits in the marketplace. They've also recently just joined, and it was a great introduction. They've joined as a founding member for Women in DSO as well. And so their mission and the Women in DSO mission and helping doctors and providers help their patients more is something that really resonates with me. And so I'm looking forward to talking a little bit more about that on today's podcast.
Excellent. And I know you're heavily involved in Women in DSO, and that event is coming up shortly in March. So you'll all be there, which is great. Tate, a little bit about your background.
Sure. So, wow, I guess I'm going on my 26th year in the dental industry. And, I've seen all sides of this business from manufacturing to distribution, spent the bulk of my career on the manufacturing side, joined Alphaeon in 2022. And with the exception of a brief hiatus, I'm going on my fourth year here with them. Excited to be back as VP of Dental Enterprise, working exclusively with DSOs and our GPO partners. And honestly, Bill, finally happy to be able to do something with you. I know we've talked about it for a while, but kudos to Amy for finally making it happen. So.
Yes, we have been talking about it for quite a while. Yeah, thank you, Amy. It's great. It's great that we're able to actually get you all on a podcast. And I think this survey, it's perfect timing to talk about this. We're kicking off relatively, young in the new year. So I think there's going to be some really interesting insights. Let's talk about the survey. What was the idea behind doing this consumer financing survey? What were you trying to achieve? Any details you can share on that? And then we're going to dig into some of the results. But maybe we'll start with you, Amy. Tell us a little bit about the survey.
Absolutely. So it really was about understanding the human side of financing, how payment options and solutions are influencing access to care across markets, how it influences their decision making, and truthfully, how it defines patient confidence within different practices and offices. It was really important for Alphaeon to hear directly from patients and not make assumptions here. We want to be able to drive results and support providers and patients with data. Financing plays a role in whether people move forward with care. That's it. It's that clear. We wanted real data to show how cost, how stress, how payment options really affect those decisions. And that in turn affects how a provider has the opportunity to deliver care. And it very largely affects how they're able to grow their business as well. So these decisions help both support providers and help providers make better decisions in the name of patient care. So that was really important to Alphaeon.
Excellent. And this was a recent survey. So can you talk a little bit about the number of people that were surveyed and how many questions and any of the details behind that?
Correct. We really wanted to position some data points and insights so that we could open 2026 strong. There has been so much movement, so much discussion, and so much that has changed within the market and consumer behavior that we closed this survey in December, and we had 500 participants. So we had the opportunity to have a focus group of that 500 in large discussions, none of those being any Alphaeon customers, so that we could really get a crystal clear view of what consumer behavior was indicating at the close of 2025.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for those details. That's great. I'm really glad this is fresh data. So, I mean, you hear a lot of things in the market. People talk about, how one group's doing and how another group's doing. I think seems like it's pretty common knowledge that treatment acceptance is challenging, and I think patients are challenged to pay for procedures now. And all you have to do is, look at your grocery bill to understand, the pressures that people have just to feed families in some cases. So let's talk about some of the responses, and then maybe you can give us some analysis and color behind what were some of the results from this survey. So the survey found that nearly 60% of consumers have either delayed or skipped care due to cost. And from your perspective, how do you think this shows up in dental practices today? Tate, maybe we can start that one with you.
Yeah, sure. So I think the way it shows up in practices today is I think you see treatment plans stalling at the front desk. A patient, they accept the diagnosis clinically, but they pause once cost enters the conversation. So, offices will hear things like, let me think about it, or I'll call you back. And, most times or many times that treatment never gets rescheduled. So when that happens, you have the breakdown of same day dentistry. You see all these practices, these DSOs, they invest heavily in technology and scheduling same day treatment. Yes, cost becomes a friction point, and stops that momentum. So that, to me, that's how it shows up.
Tony, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, just the fact that, first off, a lot of practices keep financing in the background, patient financing. And it's critical that they're aware that the practice is offering financing, because the patient, if they're not given an alternative, they can't put it on a Visa, MasterCard, or they can't pay cash. They may say, let me think about it. But in fact, they're saying, how am I going to pay for this? So they're not going to be able to pay. And then the other thing would be, treatment acceptance, converting that into optimum care. You want to make sure that the program that you do offer when you do present financing is optimized for the patient, that it makes it very easy for them to move forward.
I think there's just some interesting thoughts around this. I mean, I do think there is a lot of confusion about patient financing when it comes from the consumer perspective, right? They maybe know there are some options out there. Maybe sometimes there are almost too many options, or to your point, they're not presented. So there might be, a patient financing solution, but the customer or the patient never hears about it. So one of the other results from the survey, almost 90%, 9 out of 10 consumers said they wish there was an easier way to pay for care. So you kind of touched on it a little bit, Tony. Do you think part of the fact is that the practice doesn't necessarily communicate that there are other options out there? Why do you think there's that gap between patients wishing there was an easier way and practices not being able to deliver on that?
Yeah, I think that it's gotten better over the last 25 years. I think, when I started, most dental practice were doing in-house billing, and that's who we were competing against in the earlier days, and the technology wasn't that good, but I think it's improved tremendously. But the gap that's still there is, how easy is it to actually get somebody approved and then being able to process that and being able to start treatment immediately. And with Alphaeon patient financing, it takes a minute for the patient to get approved. And then the processing takes another minute. And then the practice is paid in 2 business days. So, there may be still a gap on the patient side, but technology has made it very, very easy for them to get through the process. First, the olden days, we were faxing back and forth, and it took an hour. But the technology is today, the consumer may think that it's harder, but it's actually gotten very easy to move forward with healthcare financing.
Yeah. So somebody might have had experience in the past with it taking too long. And I mean, I remember those days for sure. And I recently, I'd say the past year, applied for a airline credit card while I was at the airport. And I think in probably 45 seconds, I was approved. So it's just such a different process. And yeah, I think, and here's another thing that came out of the survey too. Over half of the consumers that you surveyed reported using just one of their credit cards to pay for healthcare expenses. Discuss this. I'm just kind of curious from your perspective. Are there some negatives to this for both the patient and potentially the practice? Tate, if you want to take that one.
Yeah, I think the negative for the patient there is they're trying to solve a healthcare problem with a retail tool. You know, whenever you look at the APRs for credit cards, they could be anywhere from 22 to 30%. You know, you look at the APRs for Alphaeon credit and it's 10% less, you know. So that's, you know, the biggest risk for the patient is they may spend hundreds or even thousands more for treatment over time. And then based on that, the risk for the practice is that could delay future care, you know. So a patient comes back in 6 months after putting the previous treatment on their credit card, they're still paying off that first treatment, right? So they come back in 6 months, they need something else, they may delay it because they can't afford it.
I think this brings up kind of a pretty big topic. We've kind of all these different points I think we're making. It comes back to the practice or the team educating patients on the different options that exist. Because to your point, Tate, you know, you've got, just use my credit card. Why not? And not knowing that, you know, Alphaeon might be 10 percentage points lower, right? There are other better options out there for them that they may not be aware of. From a education perspective, you know, how important is that for the teams to feel comfortable? I'm sure, you know, you and Tony, you even mentioned it where patients might not know about these other options because maybe the team isn't comfortable presenting or talking about patient financing. So they don't talk about it at all. And then, of course, you know, what's the option? They don't accept treatment. They put it on their credit card and can cause all sorts of issues. But maybe let's talk about the topic of education. You see that as a big issue?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's on two fronts. The first front would be, you know, presenting financing upfront and equal. Because as we've mentioned before, if the staff or if the practice does not believe in promoting financing along with credit cards, along with cash and checks, they're doing a disservice to the patient who may not have access to the other means or may need more money for the $4,000 or $5,000 case or whatever the amount is. The other challenge we have is, let's face it, if you work in a dental practice, you're versed in dentistry and we train you. It's a 30-minute training for somebody who may not know the difference between a revolving line of credit, an installment loan, a recourse or a non-recourse loan. And we expect them to be knowledgeable in 30 minutes. So I think that staff training is critically important in getting consumers to move forward, getting your patients to raise their hand. And I don't think a lot of staffs are comfortable in presenting financing. They're just it's easier for them just to swipe a credit card when financing may be the best option for the patient.
And Amy, I'm sure on the marketing side of things, you're heavily involved in, you know, the education and training programs.
Yeah, and if I could just add to what Tony mentioned here, I think something so impressive about the way Alphaeon supports providers is there are personalized onboarding sessions and almost monthly and routinely, not to mention quarterly check-ins, where we have team members who have been frontline in practices across different markets and they understand how to have these conversations. So they normalize it for those team members at the practice level so that they feel more comfortable, because we're also familiar with the environment within a dental practice, the transition in and out of new team members, younger team members, people who may be familiar with this or may be transitioning from another role within the practice. And I think our team does a really great job of offering that support and confidence, not just one time when they're initially onboarded, but throughout the entire partnership. There's success labs and monthly check-ins, and there's an opportunity to schedule or call the hotline 24/7 in real time. And that education and that partnership instills the confidence with the practice and their team, because to your point, in this survey, we talked about how patients know financing exists. Only 18% really understand how it works. So we're leaning heavy on that dental office team to be able to create the education for the patient when they're in the practice. But Alphaeon also wants to be able to support them with the marketing and messaging ahead of the fact. So before they go in for their visit, before they even approach, they would have already been a little more familiar with what options are available to them. And it's a lot less heavy lifting on the practice alone to try to land those solutions for their patients. And I think that's an ongoing, that's really the epitome of partnership. And I think it's definitely what I've seen Alphaeon do best in terms of their provider support.
Yeah, I think that 18% is a pretty stunning number. It just goes to show that practices have a long way to go to really educate patients on all the different options that exist out there. The next point is, here's just another statistic. Over 50% of respondents said they would like to use patient financing if their provider offered it. So again, I think a lot of times they may offer it and they don't know that they offer it because they're hesitant to talk about it. So there's that case. Do you have any idea from a perspective in the US, like how many practices out there are offering some type of patient financing? Is it a majority? And then I guess that's one question. And then number two would be how many are actually, presenting it on a regular basis?
If I could chime in, I know that Tony and I talk about this often, but our highest performing, I would say a quarter of the practices in our customer base lead with marketing and messaging on Alphaeon as a patient financing solution in their pre-patient visits. And then it is a natural part of their conversation when the patient enters and is speaking with either treatment coordinator or provider or anyone at that office staff. And so that was the fire that we wanted to light under the other providers in our customer network as well, like being involved and making sure that that communication happens pre-visit enables the practice to be able to close more treatment and get more on the books because the patients are naturally more aware of it. I wouldn't be able to speak to what the numbers look like across the country or in other practices and clinics, but we feel confident about what we're looking at in terms of our own customer community.
I think another thing there too, Bill, is what is your definition of actually presenting patient financing? Some offices just hand out a brochure or they point them to a QR code rather than actually sitting down and having a conversation. And as it pertains to Alphaeon Credit, going through our payment calculator and walking through the different options with that patient to find a monthly payment that best fits that patient and their household.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That goes back to that 18% of patients truly understanding how it works. I mean, do you understand if somebody just hands you a pamphlet or if somebody actually sits down with you and works through what the actual monthly payment looks like? I would understand the monthly payment more than something somebody said, take it home and read it. Yeah. All right, here's a question that came up. You asked consumers what was most important when it comes to making that financial decision. They had a couple different options. So there was credit score impact, there was data privacy, there was financing terms. So talk a little bit about what was most important for the consumer when, it all came down to these different options.
Yeah, I think the terms is spot on. And the great thing about Alphaeon patient financing is once you're approved on Alphaeon patient financing, the practice decides whatever terms that they want to use. Our most popular term in every market as far as the largest segment is 24 months deferred interest. Now, it doesn't mean that the most practices around the country, because a lot of practices offer 6-month deferred interest and an installment loan for 24 or 36 months because they're the least expensive. But we know that when consumers are given a choice, 70%, and with us, they could use either a deferred interest type loan or they can use installment. It's up to the practice to decide. But 72% of our practices or of our volume is through the deferred interest. So it's what the patient wants is more. Everybody thinks financing is just for those on a limited budget. It's also just as much, if not more, for people who want to be able to manage that. I want to be able to float my money for 12 months or 24 months. And then if they need to have an affordable monthly payment, they can get an installment type loan for up to 60 months or 5 years. But we leave it up to the practice and then the patient to decide the terms. And I think that's just a huge advantage for the patient because you're giving them options.
Another really interesting result from this survey is that dental care ranked as the number one service consumers said they would finance. So what were some of when you asked this question, what were some of the options, or was this a fill in the blank? And it amazes me that dentistry would be, maybe it doesn't, but it was number one on the list.
We actually covered markets for dental, cosmetic, vision, audiology, and veterinary care. So pet families and their pet patients as well. And so it was almost no shock to us, to be quite honest, that dental care ranked up there. And I think that was the urgency in being able to have conversations within the dental market and partners like you, Bill, with Group Dentistry Now, because there is no shortage of opportunity there for this audience, for this patient base. And providers who identify and understand these insights are the ones that really get to be poised for success and growth within their practice also.
I'd like to add something really quickly too, is that with some of our other markets, it's pure elective surgery. That if you're going to go get LASIK or you're going to get a facelift, you do a lot of research. You typically know what it's cost. So you're prepared for that cost when you go in. I went to my dentist last year and I thought I just needed a tooth cleaning and I needed a crown and it was $700 or whatever it was. But a lot of times in dentistry, you don't know the treatment and what it's going to cost you. So, dentistry is not purely elective, and you don't really have, unless it's even an implant, you may not know that you need an implant. And it's going to cost you $8,000, or all fours is going to cost $25,000 plus. But you don't really have a good idea going in, and that's why it's so important in dentistry that consumers know that they're able to finance that.
And I think dental insurance obviously plays a role as well, Bill. Last month I was, looking around and I found a stat. Now, people may push back on this and that's fine, but, the stat was 97% of patients have not met their annual deductible, right? So those patients are still, for the most part, paying out of pocket for everything. So it's just another point.
Yeah, it is. It's certainly interesting. I mean, we call it insurance, but sometimes it doesn't seem like it's true insurance the way we think of it. And yeah, treatment acceptance across the board when you talk to just about any practice out there, big DSO, well-run, small practice, well-run, maybe somebody not, everybody's struggling with treatment acceptance. And I think a big part of that is someone's ability to pay for something, especially to Tony's point, which I've never thought about before, but it's extremely accurate. It's, you go in, you're getting, your 6 month, you expect it's going to cost you X amount. Let's say it's $120, or it's covered by your insurance. And then all of a sudden, one visit, you need a crown or you need endo or you need something big. How am I going to pay for this? So it can be a shock to the system. So I think the natural reaction is figure out how you could put it off until you can figure out how to pay for it, even if you shouldn't. So it's great to have options like Alphaeon patient financing, and it's become so much easier for the consumer. I think the practices need to figure out how to articulate that better and feel more comfortable presenting. As we kind of wrap this up here, I just maybe I'll give each one of you a chance, that any key takeaways from this survey that you were really either surprised by or you want people in the audience to really, remember, because you've got a lot of great insights from this. And I'm sure you all probably have, different takes on everything that's in this survey. Amy, maybe we can start with you.
Absolutely. We are rooted in the mission that we want to help doctors help more patients. And so having this data gives sort of a direction in how to prepare. But from a marketing and communications, I think the percentages that are outlined and what we gleaned from this survey is that with the right partner and the right messaging or communication to your patients before, during, and after, you're really accelerating your opportunity to close more treatment or have more treatment accepted and naturally grow your practice or position your practice for better growth. And so if there's one thing that we can continue to do genuinely with the industry and our own customers, it's being able to make sure that they're ahead of that messaging and that communication to both the patients and the teams that are supporting these conversations in the practice every single day.
Thanks, Amy. Tate, your final thoughts.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, you bet. I think access to care in the next decade is going to be determined less and less by insurance and more by how well practices are able to translate treatment into manageable monthly decisions. And I think the DSOs that act on that now won't just grow faster. They'll be able to deliver better care at scale. So whenever you consider Alphaeon credit and our revolving line of credit, that is something that patients can use over and over in their practices. And they don't need additional approvals from treatment to treatment like they do with installment products. When you consider that, Bill, we're not just another financing vendor. We can be a true strategic partner with these DSOs and even an enabler of access to care across your entire organization.
Tony?
Yeah, the survey, it didn't really surprise me because, I've been hearing this for a long time, but it is all about treatment acceptance and how do you present that to the patient. And the four things that really weigh heavily when group practice leaders are looking is it's always been the big three. It's merchant fees. I want it to be reasonable that I'm able to offer it. It's approval rates, on the back end, because the more somebody approves, the more treatment acceptance I'm able to offer. It's accommodation rates or credit lines. So if I'm asking for 5,000, is the finance company giving me 1,000 or are they giving me 8,000? And I said this at the very beginning, customer service and great customer service. When your staff, the treatment coordinator, is across from the patient and she has a question, is she able to get that question? Can she call somebody, have somebody pick up the phone, get the question answered, and to be able to close that account? And I think that those are the four things that everybody should be looking at. And I think that we do at Alphaeon Patient Financing, we're especially strong in all four areas. The only way anybody's ever going to know, because a lot of times they'll say, I'll just go with the company that's been around or the company that's been in it for 6 months, but their merchant fees are really low. The only way to know is to do your research and to really pick one or two companies and then beta test them, because we can tell you anything you want to hear, but you should always evaluate what company can really drive optimum patient care. And for us personally, for the DSOs, is what's going to drive revenue. And you should be looking at all four of those characteristics and deciding that.
Excellent. So we want to make sure that if people want access to this survey, Amy, I'll ask you, what's the best place for them to link up to this? Is it your main website, alphaeon.com?
Yes, super easy, alphaeon.com, alphaeon.com, and you'll be able to access the comprehensive survey.
Right. And then as far as somebody that may want to reach out to learn more and, find out, how to take next steps, Tate, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
You can ping me on LinkedIn, or you can email me directly at tate.roark@alphaeon.com. Okay.
And you'll see Alphaeon. They'll be at Women in DSO. They're at most of the major events. So you definitely will see them there, but make sure you don't wait for the shows and you reach out, check out the survey, you'll go to alphaeon.com and then reach out to Tate, and we'll drop his email address and his LinkedIn handle in the show notes, and Tony's and Amy's as well. So you can reach out to them and ask them any questions you may have. But thank you all for being on. This is great. I really appreciate you sharing these survey results. It's one thing to talk about a solution. It's another thing to actually evaluate the market, listen to what the patients are saying, and then because it reinforces a lot, I think, of what practices have been seeing over the past year, that there's some hesitancy out there. And from the patient financing perspective, there seems to be a lot of confusion from the patient side of things. Don't necessarily understand it. So it's this is great. I think it's going to help the industry out quite a bit, both the practices, DSOs, and also the patients, for sure.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Until next time, this is the Group Dentistry Now Show.
Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to stay up to date on the latest DSO news, insights, and events. Also, subscribe to our DSO weekly e-newsletter at groupdentistrynow.com.